the coaching aspect is one of my favorites, honestly.
Yeah.
It's kind of a semantic difference, but I make a distinction between like actually coaching a person, being invested in that human's progress and
Right.
how they're doing versus like teaching a one-off lesson.
Hello and welcome to another zany episode of Nerdy West Coast Swing, the podcast with pixels where the anchors are out of this world and the points don't matter. We're here to help train your eye so you can learn faster and dance better. But tonight, we are just going to be talking. I'm Cassie Winter.
I'm Alicia Marshall. If you're wondering, who are we to be analyzing and chatting with these pros? Cassie and I both have extensive training and experience in both partnered and solo dancing. She has about 22 years and I have about 24. So tonight we have Stephen White with us. Very exciting. We're going to be chatting about some fun things. We're talking about pedagogy versus teaching the individual. Though I'm sure that we will venture down some other paths. But that is the general goal of tonight. But I think before that, generally we have our guests tell us a little bit about their dance background. So if you want to start with that.
Yeah, we can do that. I'm not quite as good with like the autobiographical stuff, so this might be a little concise, but I'll try and beef it up a little. So hi, I'm Stephen White, like they said. I actually started dance informally as a teen. There was a teen club in my little town, so the first stuff I learned was rave style dances, all this stuff. That kind of got the bug into me. And then fast forward to when I was 18, I was out in a nightclub in Jacksonville, Florida, and this pretty girl came up to me and was like, "Oh my God, like you're a good dancer. You should like come teach for our studio." And she hands me a card for this ballroom studio. And I'm thinking like, "Oh, I gotta be great. Like they're wanting me to teach for them." It's like, no, that's just a thing they do to all the guys in the nightclubs because they want more teachers. So I started doing ballroom. From all the ballroom training, I did ballroom for 6-7 years full time as a professional. And then partway through that, I found West Coast Swing because the ballroom studio the ballroom studio took a trip to USA Grand Nationals. So I found West Coast Swing, loved it, eventually ended up segueing into that. And the bulk of my dance training has been in West Coast Swing and ballroom. I've done some education as far as solo dance goes, but it's been like a month in New York at BDC, a couple of classes here and there, nothing hugely significant. Mm-hmm. And that's my condensed Reader's Digest version of dance background.
Great.
Well done, sir. Well done.
Very informative. So, shall we
dive into the topic of the evening?
Sure.
So
I'm at your disposal.
So Stephen, why don't you define pedagogy for the people?
Awesome. So this one is an interesting one because pedagogy is literally just the method and practice of teaching, especially as an academic subject or a theoretical concept. But an interesting thing that's happened is it has started to become separated in its idea with another thing called andragogy. Andragogy is the idea, the method and practice of teaching adult learners in adult education. So pedagogy has become this kind of thing where it's like, oh, this is teaching kids, and andragogy has become this thing of teaching adults. But realistically, people still use the term pedagogy to just mean teaching as an academic subject, the method and practice of teaching.
I was so excited because like whenever we invite a guest host on, we always ask them like, is there a topic that you really want to cover? So you came up with this topic, and just why was that the thing that you wanted to talk to us about tonight?
Well, like teaching's always been a parallel passion of mine with dancing. I was teaching before I was even dancing, and human behavior has also been a big interest of mine. Why people do the things they do, how they process information, what they do with that information. So, like for me, you're asking me, yeah, what can you talk about for an hour? Like this, this I can easily talk about for any number of hours, especially with such an interesting culture behind it like West Coast Swing, because we're very we're a melting pot of a lot of different things in a lot of different ways, and a lot of motivated people. So you get very interesting things out of that mixture.
Definitely.
I also think it's an area that we can improve a lot in as educators in West Coast Swing and as students in dance, understanding pedagogy, andragogy, and how to handle it better on a personal end is something that can benefit all of us.
Right. So this is purposely a leading question because I'm curious about what your answer is, but do you consider teaching and dancing to be two separate skills?
Do I consider teaching and dancing to be two separate skills? Absolutely. Yeah, totally. Like I consider most of my job to be all separate skills: teaching, dancing, business, the ability to call people back. So yeah, definitely. Like, yeah, I've put just as much time into learning to be an effective educator as I have tried to learn to be an effective dancer as well.
Yeah, that's great.
It would shock me if anyone answered that one separately, like the other direction, I think.
I think it's not necessarily that people consciously believe those are intertwined, but there tends to be behavior as if they are intertwined, you know?
Yeah. I understand what the two definitely get conflated. Like, the best dancers are the ones you see teaching prominently.
Right. Bingo.
Yeah, it actually kind of reminds me of the conversation that we had with Miles about judging versus being able to, you know, have high level dancing skills.
How do you structure, like, let's talk about how you teach, Stephen. So like, let us behind the scenes, behind the curtain, like how do you structure your lessons and whether that is different between like a group format, like a recurring format or a private lesson format, that kind of stuff.
Yeah. Okay, so this one's going to be a little bit of a rabbit hole, like we were saying earlier.
Go for it.
So a lot of the times, like we were talking about the difference between pedagogical versus andragogical. If I'm dealing with something where I don't know to an extent how much information I'll have to rely on or what kind of result I can necessarily gear for, I will take a pedagogical approach. I will be in charge of the curriculum. It will be a set curriculum, fixed to an extent, and I will guide the people through it regardless of where they're coming from at that time, right? So a typical group class is going to follow that approach of necessity. It's very hard to actually have an approach that leads itself towards adults being more adults in that setting, right? You can't take 200 adults and be like, all right, how are you going to fit this to your needs? Like, no, you have to give them the information and let them do with it as they will, right? So I would say for workshops, especially one-offs like an event, that's where I would go back towards the fixed curriculum idea, right? I still try and have options and give as much information so that that education can be crafted. I try and be non-dogmatic with my education. I don't necessarily believe in that at all. There are more right and less right ways to do things, but West Coast Swing is not exactly something where we have a fixed ideal that we can work towards, right? It's not like something like ballet where you do have a little bit more of an ideal you can work towards, where you have some concrete things. Like, no, at the farthest levels of our dance, we have examples that wildly vary that you can work for.
Absolutely.
I say it again for those in the back row, because like I feel like that's one of the things that gets lost in translation a lot in West Coast Swing. Would you agree?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think we have a tendency to have little nuggets of knowledge that get thrown around very widely, but they don't have the impact they need because they're not personalized. Like we have this idea of having good technique in West Coast.
Right.
Good technique. Technique is the ability to do a skill or an ability better. Like, you have to be specific as to like what the technique is you are trying to improve on. You can't necessarily have good technique in West Coast Swing. You can have good technique for aspects of West Coast swing. As an example of like something that gets too broad to be useful, in my opinion.
I think you kind of already talked about it, but what do you feel like is problematic about just the pedagogy for West Coast swing in general?
Well, just to clarify, I don't necessarily think it's problematic. I think that sometimes it's overused. The big difference between like pedagogical and andragogical is when you're talking about andragogy, learners are dependent more on themselves. Like the pedagogical approach is a learner being dependent on the teacher. It doesn't really have a lot to do with the life experience of the person. It's like you have this information, you get this information, go on. Everything is designated from the teacher. Andragogically, you can use experience as a foundation. Instructors can build on existing knowledge that the adult has. Learning can be triggered by any number of experiences, not necessarily just the classroom setting. Students can help each other, right? So I do think there's room for pedagogical approaches to teaching dance, but I think we, especially in one-on-one sessions, private lessons, or in a coaching relationship, I think we're doing someone a disservice if all we're doing is giving them the things that we personally do, rather than tailoring that education to them and their journey.
Yeah, that's great.
So if we start talking about like the dominant kind of standard pedagogy of West Coast swing, could you maybe, from your perspective, like identify like the top few things that are a part of that, and whether or not you agree with those being the top few things? Does that at least make sense as a question?
Kind of. Like when you say the top few things that are being taught like pedagogically, would you mean like
what is prioritized and how it is communicated to students?
Oh, so that's kind of an interesting thing that I see amongst various instructors, that there is a disparity in that. So it's like this instructor will be like, this is what I do and this is what's important. You should focus on this. And then this next instructor is saying something completely different. And then this other instructor is saying completely different. So like we have all of these different priorities put in different ways pedagogically that people are either going to take as gospel or not take as gospel, depending on like their interaction with the community. That's one of the interesting things to me, is like all the variables about how people can experience the community. As we don't necessarily have like coaching relationships. We don't have a lot of things where like one student stays with a coach that then helps guide their entire progress. Most of the time people are bouncing from instructor to instructor and instructor and taking all of this information and wrapping it into a whole themselves. So I think there's some benefit in that, but I think you get more benefit from that as a student if you can understand how better to tailor that approach to yourself using the idea of like an andragogical setting.
Do you feel like it is more beneficial for newer students or newer dancers to kind of find somebody that, you know, they feel like they agree with and just kind of work mostly with them? Or do you feel like it's more beneficial for them to kind of start out by kind of broadening the horizons and kind of seeing all the different instructors and ways of thinking?
I'd say with newer student, my opinion would definitely be more towards the former. Like I think the structured approach is probably better in the beginning. You need something to build off of, right? Once you have that something, though, ideally you would be given the format to be able to productively build off of it in a way that benefits you more. Like I see tons of people that prescribe to certain ways of dancing that are not necessarily necessary for our dance style, but they also don't fit that person's body or style, and you can tell it's uncomfortable on them, but they're doing it just because that's what they've been taught.
I know personally, I kind of am of the mind that once you kind of get a good, you know, ground of just basics and whatnot, I think that it's beneficial for you to kind of identify who's dancing you like and who kind of fits what you're already doing and what you feel comfortable with. I think that that's kind of the best way, and kind of work with them the majority of the time. Although I think it's important to explore other instructors as well, just so that you have a broad idea of all of the different things being said. But I think that in general, it's really beneficial to find somebody that, you know, is very similar to you and work mostly with them. Just, you know, body type, and I think it's just helpful, and that's my opinion. But
yeah, no, I totally agree with that. And like one of the things I actually resourced for this conversation, I used with a ton of my students when we talk about like creative process and how to like build your own dance. There's this really awesome website. Where did I put it? It's Everything is a Remix. Everything is a Remix. .info. Yeah, you've seen the video?
Yeah.
Yeah, so they've got a whole web page now with various versions of the video too, and like other things coming out on it. And, yeah, if you go to everythingisaRemix.info, you can watch that video, and it talks about like literally, it's in the name, everything's a remix. You take existing things, existing information, and you redo them in a different way. That's exactly the process we have for our dance to an extent.
Yeah, because truly original ideas are nigh impossible at this point in our evolution as humans. So it's always, whether you know it or not, you're probably copying someone in some way, shape, or form. But the trick is to put your spin on it as a unique individual, which leads to another question. What is your experience around, because it can be frustrating as a teacher to see a student that could flourish if they just let themselves be themselves, and yet they're trying to copycat one of their favorite dancers. And they're trying to be something that they're not. It's like you want to help pull them out of their shell and let them be them and unique, and not just a 100% copycat of this other amazing dancer.
Yeah, interestingly, I've had less experience with that one and more experience with people not even allowing themselves to get that far. With them not even thinking, more of the mindset of like, oh, well, like I could never look like Todd, so I can't try and copy that. Like not the idea. Like you got to try to find out first. But I have had it before where they get so much into the copying, to trying to simulate the person, that they don't really want to break away from it. They don't feel they have the confidence to break away from it. I honestly feel like that's a little bit of an easier transition. Like you can get them through smaller steps to develop their other things, even if it's just like, oh, what about this person? You like them too. What happened if this person and this person had a baby and they danced? You can coax someone through that process, right? Versus it's harder to instill in someone the idea that like the way you think about a thing is going to impact the quality of that thing. Small sideline on this, but I thought it was really cool. I actually have information on central nervous system training, and I did this in the workshops that I did in Seattle and in Portland. One of the things they did for like an example of a central nervous system training was like they made you do a standing leap, and you had to like touch the wall as high as you could. And then after you did that, you had to yell at the top of your lungs and try and believe it, I am the greatest.
Okay.
And inevitably, as long as people believed, they would actually jump higher the second time. They would be able to break through a little bit of that barrier. And like I made the people in the workshop do this to illustrate the idea that like I don't know if I can say that word, the stuff that you have in your head.
We don't care.
You're fine.
Okay,
use all the words
shit
here.
that you have in your head matters, and how you think about the thing matters. Like maybe you can just say to yourself, okay, I'll be more confident, but it's worth like investing the time into trying to improve the mindset, because you'll get better results out of it.
Yeah. That reminds me of a simple exercise from Argentine Tango, where you stand facing your partner about 2 strides away, and then you both take 1 step towards each other, get like nose to nose, and you both say confidently, I am here, without wavering and falling back. It may seem so simple, but until you've practiced it to the extent where you can feel comfortable in that space as a dancer, like you're going to trip up in other areas. So I love that one.
That's a good one. Like
Isn't
even
it great?
thinking about that one being this close to my first thought, like on that, was like, oh, I need 2 masks.
Fair.
In the time of COVID.
Fair. Full hazmat suit. I am here. We are
right?
both fogging up our masks.
It's like, oh, which eye do I look at? Like, I can't keep both. I gotta.
Ding, 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 ding.
Oh my gosh. It's very interesting. Thinking about how much mindset has to do with just learning in general and teaching to an extent. Like, I feel like you have to feel confident in being able to work with any kind of learner. I think it's very not detrimental, but it's harder for people that have such different learning styles when an instructor is just so focused on one way of thinking or teaching. And I feel like it takes a lot of confidence to an extent to be able to kind of break out and do your own thing as an instructor and try and teach things your way and in a way that you feel can translate well to whoever you're teaching. And I think as teaching more of a group, that's not quite the same thing, but specifically with more one-on-one situations, I think it's really important to have that right mindset for trying to be able to improve somebody's dancing rather than just well, here's what I have for you.
Right.
Oh, absolutely.
Very different.
Absolutely. Like that, there's a ton of benefit in that one on both ends of the spectrum there, both for like educators and students. It's like I was nervous as hell, like going in these group classes and telling people, oh, you're gonna jump and touch the wall. but I was able to have enough confidence in the impact of the material that you can push through that. And one of the things I try and teach all of my people that work with me consistently is to have a good understanding of their own things. Don't be afraid to ask questions.
Yeah.
If you understand your material well enough, it doesn't really matter how the other instructor is going to present their material. You're going to be able to get something from it. As long as you're able to take those things and dissect them into building blocks that are, referential to you in some way. Absolutely.
Yeah. Do you find it hard to help your students like interpret things that they've heard from other instructors or other dancers?
I don't usually find that difficult. Like I've invested a ton of time and money into actually learning what a lot of these other instructors are saying and their own ways of teaching and such. So generally I have at least a working understanding of the major groupings of things in the community. Like there's been very few things that have stumped me as far as like, what in the world is this person talking about? And the vast majority of those things that stumped me were mistranslations from the student end. I have no shame though in actually going to another instructor and being like, hey, my student said this, what did you mean? So,
I think that's great. I think there's just so many different ways that instructors say things and they mean the same thing that it's like, just want to verify with you. I think this is what you meant. Is that accurate?
Oh yeah. The communication part is so much fun. Like I can say the same sentence to 3 different people and get 3 different results, obviously. So like being able to understand that filter of like, I want the person to do this thing, so I'm going to say this thing, they're going to hear it this way, and then they're going to do this thing. It's all like separate points you have to navigate.
Right.
Absolutely. Right. I think that is something that makes a great instructor, is that they're able to really like separate all of that,
And if I'm really like connecting 5 million dots to help create a certain effect for my student, I try to tell them like, okay, I'm pinging around a lot of things. So don't think it's A to B. I'm doing A to Z for you. And I try to explain the complexity of how I'm trying to teach. So that way they don't misconstrue the tool I'm giving them for a certain result. But being willing to just like keep going with a student and keep trying to communicate or demonstrate something in a way until it clicks in their mind, I find just invaluable as a teacher. Because I know I've been the student on the other end who a teacher has just said the same thing over and over and over again. And I'm like, it's clearly not getting through. Don't know why you keep trying.
Maybe let's try this a different way.
I mean, I can definitely cop to, like, I've been that teacher before too. You have those moments of frustrations, like, but I said this, just do the thing I said, which it's not great. Like, you definitely got to learn to not do that as a teacher.
Yeah.
But yeah, being able to explain things in various ways is extremely important, and being able to try and get to the end result with various modalities is important. Like, not everything always has to be like super technical. Even if we're working on something that is mechanics oriented, there's plenty of other ways you can get to the end result of those mechanics, be it with like inspiring a certain feeling in the person, or giving a visualization, or something other than just, rotely beating them into submission on the stuff. But the coaching aspect is one of my favorites, honestly. Like, it's kind of a semantic difference, but I make a distinction between like actually coaching a person, being invested in that human's progress and how they're doing, versus like teaching a one-off lesson. Like, I'll teach a person and still be invested in their progress and everything, but when I get the investment back from the other person, like, I love that when we have that kind of back and forth together.
Yeah.
Which there's a couple people watching now that do that with me.
Such an important relationship to have with, students, just be able to have that open communication and go back and forth with them. So beneficial to have, somebody in your corner.
Yeah, it's so rewarding both ways. And then as a teacher, you become a better teacher, because usually you need to arrive at a certain amount of intimacy between the coach and the student before the student can maybe give you some constructive feedback that can take your teaching to the next level.
Yeah. It's an interesting point.
Yeah, trust has to go both ways there.
So when you're in a private lesson context and it's one of your first times, if not the first time working with a student, what is your process for diagnosing and helping a student achieve the goal that they have come to you for?
Ooh, that's an excellent one. Well, the very, very first thing I ask them is how I can help them. Like, I want to know why they're coming to me to begin with. And based off of that answer, the next thing I'll generally ask them is like, okay, tell me more about that. Tell me your actual goals for the dance. What are you working towards? And then they'll tell me that. Most of the time it's something that's like, oh, I want to get better competitively. I want to be able to teach one day. I just want to be a better social dancer. And then the place where we start to have the really good conversation is when I ask them why. Now, honestly, like, a disturbing amount of the time, I don't really get any further answers from that. They want to get better competitively because that's the thing you do in West Coast swing, I guess. Or they want to be better social dances, which that one's kind of self-fulfilling anyways. Everyone wants to feel better about what they're doing, right?
Yeah.
But based off of the information that I get from them, I talk them through a little bit about what my idea for the plan would be. Obviously, I dance with them and see like what's going on in their movement. I'll have them walk around for me so I can see if there's like anything actually mechanical we really need to worry about in the context of the dance. Sometimes I'll get background on what information that they've had access to before, because like it's a lot easier to work with someone sometimes if I know like, oh, they've done 90% of their stuff with Tessa and Miles, or with RJ, or with Robert. Then I kind of know what background I have access to have a common vernacular, or if they even have like a ballroom background. And from there, it's kind of assess, see what resonates with the person. Like, if they respond more to visualization, if they respond more to like me tactilely just moving them around, they respond to more mechanical kind of input, and just try and give them the most that I can give them in that time.
Great.
Awesome. Have you noticed over the course of your history teaching West Coast swing any like dominant trends in what you're focusing on in private lessons over a period of time?
Interestingly, when I was first starting, there was this, I felt like everyone had this big obsession with connection. And it was kind of ephemeral, right? Like, everyone would say connection, but when they thought connection, everyone would think a slightly different thing. It's like, oh, like my teacher talked about the stretch, or the A and the V and the weight, and like I feel this thing in the hand, or like we have pressure this direction, like all of these various things. And eventually that segued to technique. Like now I feel like so many people are like, oh, I want better technique. And then I have to ask a bunch of follow-up questions like, what does that mean to you? What do you mean technique? What are you actually trying to improve? Is it aesthetically based? Is it mechanically based, etc.?
Right.
So I feel like there's it might be a little bit cynical, but I feel like a lot of trends in the direction we end up teaching, especially for one-offs, become predicated off of the feedback that judges are giving in the 1 or 2 sentences that they have to share with, oh, why didn't I make finals?
Right.
I have no actual data to back that up, but I feel like it fits.
I think based on our conversation with Miles about judging,
yeah,
you were not the only one who thinks that way. It's like this convoluted game of telephone where the original information isn't necessarily complete and therefore trustworthy to begin with, and then it just gets bastardized along the route.
Yeah, we could have a few more hours even on just the judging thing. That was definitely a pet peeve of mine too. Yeah. I mean, it's interesting though, because contextually for West Coast Swing and like talking about teaching in West Coast Swing, like going back to that idea that we don't necessarily have a complete ideal to go for. If we're trying to improve competitively, we have to go off of the word of the people judging us, but that word doesn't necessarily always correlate to the results that you're seeing.
Yeah.
So if you go by the results you're seeing, you have to find somebody that can teach you to get to those results in the right way, because most of it's illusory, right? You can't just do what you see. There's a lot that goes on underneath it that you also have to accomplish. So like, there's always that thing of like, how much do you listen to the judge? How much do you go find other information? How much stock do you even put in this thing? Because it's vastly opinion-based.
Yeah, very much so. I personally feel like the best way to go about, doing better in comps in general is just to better your understanding and better your own, dancing in general. And I think that, feedback from judges is fine, but I mean, I don't think that it's necessarily the most important part of improving your dancing and improving, your competitions and whatnot.
Yeah. If I'm looking at trends and overall results, there's a lot of people that really do not give a damn what other people think that are very successful.
Yep.
But they put in a lot of work on that too.
Yep. Yeah. I mean, varies person to person, but I think that it's just more important about learning and doing things the way you want to and improving on what you're doing in general.
Yeah, I mean, authentic is always going to be the best aesthetic. Like, you're never going to get around that.
Very much so. How do you feel about people going into private lessons and just wanting to do better in competition and not really having much to work off of other than just that specific goal?
That doesn't really bother me that much, honestly. Like, I feel like historically our dance kind of comes from competitive roots. I think humans by nature are competitive, and we can take it in a negative or positive route. So I think definitely we as a community need to really improve the competitive culture we have, especially our mindset around that competitive culture. But it never bothers me if that's like someone's goal. Based off of how I see them interacting with that goal, it'll change how I pursue the topic with that person, though. And like if they are in the negative side of it, that'll be a different conversation than if I see somebody pursuing it positively.
Do you feel like you tend to see it in a more positive manner or a more negative manner?
Unfortunately, I see it way more often in the negative or neutral kind of manner, either where it's like they're internally taking these results that they really don't have a ton of control over, and they're internalizing that, or where there's not a great understanding of how to use the results to motivate yourself, how to actually interact with the competition and with the unknowables and with the uncontrollables in a productive manner to bolster the actual controllables.
Mm-hmm.
And like, I can say that as someone for a number of years who was doing it in a very poor manner myself, something I'm still working on. So
yeah. Yeah. I think that's I think it does tend to be a hard thing to overcome for people, is having that, negative mindset towards how they're doing in competition. And, I think it's hard to get over not transferring that into, just socially dancing and just in general, how you're enjoying dancing and going out and,
Right.
True.
Yeah.
It's difficult. People take the results as a reflection of either their dance worth or self-worth, and like that's nowhere even close to the case.
Yeah. I know that's something I struggled with a lot, and yet I was trying to tackle it from a West Coast swing perspective. But for me personally, it's like, oh no, I need to go see a therapist for this, because it was just indicative of a larger problem that I had from my personal large history of trauma. And as I have proceeded down that healing route, I have a much healthier relationship with West Coast swing competition. So yeah, tackling it from the right perspective when you're experiencing that problem is like super important.
Absolutely. And one of the cool things I see with West Coast Swing right now too is we're actually having some, I'm going to word this carefully because I don't want to try and construe the wrong thing. We have some professional educators that have either interest or education in mental well-being, and they're becoming more vocal about it in the West Coast swing scene. Not that they're diagnosing people or doing any of that shit, but
Right.
I do very much like that the mental health aspect of our dance is taking a little bit more of a forefront than what I've seen in the past.
Mm-hmm.
I would agree.
It's very, very important. And I think that even part of that, like for, Cassie and I, what we've been trying to impress upon people is that, we want to help you guys improve, but we want to help you improve so that, everyone can have more fun. Like, we're not trying to be like, well, you have to just do better because you're not doing good. It's not like that type of negative mentality. We want to be like, well, we want everyone to, improve, because everyone wants to enjoy themselves when they're out dancing. And that is the main reason we're all here. So that's what we've been trying to really impress upon our audience, at least.
Yeah. Empower people to make informed choices about how they move their bodies and interact with other people so they can enjoy themselves more. Like,
Absolutely.
point.
You can't just always be like, oh, you didn't triple 10 lashes. Sometimes like that, not always. I don't understand why some judges don't want to just be honest and be like, dude, I don't remember. Like, that was 10 seconds of my life 2 days ago. Like,
I think that would be so much better, more beneficial. Rather than giving information that you're like, I think I kind of maybe remember this. I'm not really sure.
Yeah. Whenever it's been really important for me to get like a particular judge's feedback, I'll send them the video. Be like, hey, you judged me in this comp. Here's some video.
Yes.
They'll probably jog your memory and be like, oh yeah, that's why I gave you this result. But other than that, I would just like,
I've got a decent memory too, and most of the time my go-to for people is just telling them what I remember overall about their division. Like generally, if I can use W3 as an example. Somebody asked me about intermediate, and I remembered in intermediate, like one of the big things that was making the cuts for the leads on that one was how comfortable those dancers looked in their own body. Like, were they able to move without being stiff when they changed their weight? Was there those small, just residual changes in how their body interacted with each other? Was everything being held the whole time? Like, look, I'm doing great technique. I mean, that was a thing I could actually latch onto and tell them, like, yeah, well, I can't talk about you specifically, but this is what was making the cut for me as far as like all of these people.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I wish more judges approached it that way, because based on a lot of feedback I've experienced throughout my career in West Coast Swing, like that would be more valuable to me than the random 1 or 2 sentences about my own dancing.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, that's honestly what some judges would hate me for saying this, but the reality is that's mostly what you're getting from a judge anyways. They have an impression of your dancing. They're not seeing detail. You don't have time to see detail.
Right.
Like, you can justify it after the fact, like, oh yeah, like your toe wasn't pointed. Like, out of the like hundreds of different things that you can actually analyze on a body or in a dance, like that's the thing that held me back. Okay.
No, because like once you've trained your eye to a certain level as a dancer and then as a judge, like your subconscious is able to like process a lot of information that you're not consciously aware of. So you just get this overall impression. And if you're doing raw scoring, like 1 out of 10 for a person, you're just like, getting a 6. You write it down, you move on. You don't overthink it too much.
When they were doing the GPDSI, I can't remember the full acronym, but when like judges training was a thing that people were trying to make happen in West Coast Swing, one of the things that came up was the book Blink by Malcolm Gladwell. You all familiar with that one?
Yeah, a little bit, yeah.
Yeah, so part of the idea was exactly that, like subconscious mind and how much is processing. So like I was in a position shortly after that where I got to test it. There was a division, I think it was like either novice or newcomer, where there was twice as many follows as leads, and I was judging leads. So all the leads had to dance twice. The first time through, I actually tried to do an analysis and I tried to like see details and put down the like raw score. And the second time through, I did not try and see any detail. I got an impression and I wrote down the raw score and just went. And I purposefully tried to switch like top of the paper to bottom, bottom to top and all that, so I wouldn't retain any memory. And the vast majority of my scores were within like 1 or 2 points. There was not a significant difference in the process.
Yeah.
Kind of anecdotal, but it was telling for me.
Yeah. And I think this is where some judges say they don't have bias. That's where it becomes problematic, because part of your impression is your unconscious biases. It's by definition unconscious. And so unless you have the opportunity to spend like 20 seconds on a given dancer to really make sure that you're giving them an objective score, there's going to be biases playing into your score. It's just, we're humans. That's what happens.
Yeah, you can never get rid of bias. You can only mitigate it. And that's actually a really good tie-in back to the idea of, what we were talking about with pedagogy versus teaching a student. Like your ability to judge is also going to be closely tied into your ability to diagnose. If your judging is predicated off of this idea of like, oh, like, well, I have to see these 5 specific things for a person to make finals, odds are your pedagogy is probably going to be tied up in that too. And you're going to be teaching this vast array of people all of this cookie cutter information that may or may not work for them depending on how specific it is.
Bingo. I want to toast to that. So, okay, here's an interesting question, because like Alicia and I are not even remotely as well known as you or your peers. And but wondering if when you were earlier in your West Coast Swing teaching career, did you experience the problem of you'd give a student a piece of advice, they wouldn't care, and then they'd hear the same piece of advice from like the West Coast Swing pantheon, like someone in the top 5, and then it's like godsend? Have you ever experienced that yourself?
I'm honestly not sure. Like, if I did, it's probably something that I would laugh off and think is funny and probably just give the person shit about. Like, I literally just said that to you. You're going to pay all that extra money to hear what I just said. But to my recollection, I don't recall that. But like my journey coming up was kind of weird anyway. So like, I don't know if that would have necessarily been a thing that occurred too much. It's like I was getting shit from a lot of people because I was a novice in West Coast swing, but teaching professionally and doing pro-ams because I came from ballroom.
Right.
So
everyone has very different situations.
mhm.
Yes.
Yeah.
It is what it is.
Yep. I mean, I wouldn't change it if I had to go back, but it was definitely a funny realization. Like, oh, is that why these people are giving me those looks? Like, I didn't know that. Okay.
Yep. It's very interesting, the level of respect that people get for different levels of knowledge and experience.
Yeah.
Mhm.
I feel like it's not equal.
Yeah. Social clout tends to weigh really heavily in West Coast swing.
Yeah.
Because there's this hierarchy to the professional structure, in like a super structured way. Yeah.
It's definitely I remember I used to very strongly be of the opinion like, oh, we should separate amateur and professional competition. And I think it was a conversation with Ben Morris I had to change my mind on that one. I can't remember the details because it's been so long ago, but I remember thinking of the idea of the other problems in our particular ecosystem that kind of thing would breed. Like we have a hard enough time designating like how and who and when you can dance in the champions division, much less making it a thing like, oh, you know, to be a professional, you must meet these certain criteria.
Right.
I do think the UCWDC has an interesting way of doing it, though. They predicate it on the idea of your income based from teaching. If you make more than a certain amount of money from teaching, then you are considered a professional.
Right.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Which, fair.
Right.
I kind of like the idea, though, that like a significantly trained and hardworking person could just sweep in and beat the people that do it for a living. Like, I feel like there's been cases of that. Can't think of it off the top of my head, but there's got to be at least one.
Probably.
Yeah.
I mean, there's so many different backgrounds that dancers have coming into our dance specifically. It's
Oh yeah, we are a melting pot.
It's great.
Oh, I love it. Yeah.
So great, but it creates a lot of different how do I want to say that? Different levels in each level, I think is the way I'm going to say that.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
The divisions are also melting pots.
Yeah.
Which
absolutely, yeah. Well, that's an interesting one for me too, because I think a lot of that is also rooted in the way that we categorize the informations. Like because West Coast swing is such a loose standard, right? We have to define it with a stopwatch and pattern-based criteria. Like because it's such a loose standard, we have so many varieties of ability for success. And like I've said this to his face, so I don't mind saying it on here, but like if you look at a Matt Auclair, Matt Auclair on any given day can beat the heck out of any of us in a Jack and Jill or a Strictly by doing what he's good at and doing it excellently, because the man is brilliant at what he does. But like, he could be out there beating someone like myself, who's trained for X number of years in various styles, and like dance-wise, I could probably dance circles around Matt, but he's still going to beat me in that Jack and Jill. It's like we don't have a direct correlation between various skill set to success with that skill set. So I feel like in a lot of ways, like our competitive atmosphere kind of becomes least common denominator with the impact that you can get across to the most amount of people.
Right.
Yeah.
So that brings me to quality of movement.
Yeah, that's a great one.
Ooh,
that tends to be like the hot button term. It's like, well, this person had excellent quality of movement, and that's why they made finals. So that's not necessarily a fully formed question, but hopefully you get what I'm asking.
Yeah. I think that's another one where it's just lacking in specificity. Like if I tell someone they have good quality of movement, that's not going to be a standalone statement. I'm going to say, like, I like the quality you have in your movement because these things. And I feel like most of it eventually boils down to the person understanding the range of movement and the factors of movement in their body, because all of our joints have different range of motion. All of our muscles fire slightly differently. We all have different nerve clusters that work differently. Like even though we have specific mechanics that work, like gravity isn't going away. That's always going to operate the same way, hopefully.
I hope,
Right.
So
all
far.
of those interact with us very differently. That's why you can have somebody like, a Trin Veal standing next to a Cameo Cross. And you can say both of their qualities of movement are good, but those qualities are respective to the movement that they are trying to intentionally create. So, like, I would never tell someone, yeah, your quality of movement was good, unless there was some context for them to either understand what I meant or for me to be able to, like, follow up with that and be like, and here's why I think
right.
Right.
But yeah, that's another great example of, like, the one I talked about with technique earlier. Like, oh yeah, I want to improve my technique. I want to improve my quality of movement. Like, we're gonna have to go a little deeper.
Yep, be a little bit more specific here.
Yeah, that's why on Alicia's and my Patreon, we essentially like write an essay defining a term for week 1 of every month.
Yeah.
And then we're like, and these are related terms that you'll often hear in conjunction with this term, but here are the distinctions, here are the misconceptions. There's a reason we call ourselves Nerdy West Coast.
I love it.
We're on brand.
I think that was actually one of the things I did too in the beginnings of the recent workshops I taught. For the connection part, I went through each one and we talked about, like, what it means to various instructors and how it's going to translate for the class we're using.
Yeah.
It's important. Like, everyone says stretch, but for some people stretch means weight, and for other people stretch means elasticity, and for other people stretch means, like, taking your center off your support. Like,
yes.
Yep.
So much yes. That's always like,
could be right.
When you're working with a group for the first time, you're not necessarily familiar with everyone. Those first 5 to 10 minutes is basically finding the common ground, so that way you can be effective for the rest of the class. So when you do plan out a more like pedagogical, structured, like workshop format, how much of it is like do you plan maybe potentially like a 90-minute class in case they're learning really quickly so you can fit it all in? Or do you plan like the first 15 minutes and expect a tangent to go from that, and then you'll be able to handle it?
That kind of depends on my comfort level with the place. Like, if I was to go teach a workshop tomorrow here in Florida, I probably honestly wouldn't even plan. I would show up, look at the people, and go, all right, I know what y'all need. If I was like what I did for Seattle and Portland, because I wasn't quite as familiar with both of those places. It's been a while since I went back there. I worked from macro to micro. Like, I plotted out the big things that I wanted to have happen in each section. I plotted out the points I wanted to cover in the various sections, and I gave myself leeway to go back and forth in those. So, like, the things that I had actually had written down did not necessarily end up being completely the things that were in the workshop. But based off the one I did in Seattle too, I also adjusted the one I did in Portland. So I'd say a little bit of all of it, depending on the situation. Like, my typical process is just ABC planning. Like, I know exactly what the class is going to be, and I have a B version in case I need more content and a C version in case I need to, like, tone down the content.
Yeah, I think that's a good way to go about it.
Yeah. I approach it very similarly myself.
Pretty tried and true.
Yeah. Oh, is there like a meaningful difference to how you approach teaching, whether or not the student's goal is competitive versus social?
That would actually depend. Well, short answer would be yes, but that would actually depend on where that student is at in their journey. So If I have somebody that's more like towards the novice level, if I have someone that's newer, let's say that, so we're not using that system. Generally, the things that are going to benefit them competitively and socially are going to be the same anyways. So like I can tailor it a little bit toward their specific needs, but it's mostly going to be the same info. The farther along they get competitively, though, the more specific that information would have to become. It's like I'm not often going to be talking about showmanship or strategy or tactics with someone for social dancing, unless it's like floor craft, because definitely there's a ton of social dancers that need floor craft.
Yeah.
But
becomes bobblehead. Yes.
I would say, though, the vast majority of the things that I would teach for a social dancer are going to translate more to competition. Just for a social dancer, I'm going to prioritize the comfort level over the person's aesthetic value. So like the whole bent knee, straight knee thing, like if somebody feels better in a bent knee, it's not going to freaking matter if they're social dancing. Like I very straightforwardly tell them, if you're not going to compete, don't worry that much about your aesthetics. Let's worry about how it feels to you, how it feels to your partner, and like the impact you're getting out of the stuff.
Yep. Fully agree with that approach.
I will say, because I know some people are going to call me on this one, I will say, though, that doesn't mean that I ignore mechanics, and I do have conversations with the people about like what's going to be better for their body stress-wise, et cetera, et cetera. But like the example I had, bent or straight, isn't going to impact that much.
Right. Yeah. But then again, like knees are a rather important joint, and some people's knees are just wonky and need a little bit more maintenance or nuance. I know personally, I'm extremely knock-kneed, and what's been really funny is if I'll go to some champion level dancers and ask for help, but they have no felt experience with knock knees, so they're just like, make room. And I'm like, I am not riding a horse.
Oh, would you like me to do that?
Could you be more specific, please?
Oh my God.
Like I had a solo background, so I was able to like cover really well, but I'm like, I'm just doing this for me at this point. Who knows how it's supposed to be done in West Coast swing, but I don't care anymore.
That's an excellent attitude to have.
Exactly.
I will definitely say too, like I am not a huge fan of dance instructors trying to take on things that should be done by like PTs or bodyworkers. It's like if somebody's got some kind of injury or like musculoskeletal thing, I ain't telling them shit. Like, okay, well here's what we need to do for your dancing, but you should also go see these people because I am not a qualified professional here.
Right.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. Couldn't agree more.
It's so important to be able to help like with certain people's various workarounds or like the things that they need to, like, oh, I can't really do that. My body doesn't let me do that.
Yeah. And like the cool thing about our dance too is like 9 times out of 10, I can probably find someone who's been fairly successful that's had the same issue. Like, the postural tilt, anterior pelvic tilt, posterior pelvic tilt, the forward head thing, like messed up knee, messed up arm, something like I can probably find someone that's had it in West Coast swing, but they've still done fairly well for themselves. Well, that's always a good tool to resource as well. Either go talk to this person or like check this out.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Which, is why it's great that there's so many different examples at high levels of, different ways to do things.
Yeah, word. I definitely think a good thing for the educational scene in West Coast swing would be teachers getting much more comfortable with saying they don't know.
Yeah.
That would be vastly beneficial for all of us.
Yeah, very much so.
Yeah, agreed. So we've gone for about an hour now. How about we open it up to everyone who's with us? So if you have a question for Stephen, feel free to unmute yourself and turn on your camera if you're willing, or you can type it in the chat.
Yep.
All right. Really, does nobody have questions, comments, concerns, bad jokes, something?
Oh yeah, Laura's got a good point there.
Yeah, Laura says
Probably not the worst analogy I've used, but yeah, I'll often make an analogy about connection and communication. Like, there's no such thing as connection, a perfect communication, as anyone who's ever been in a relationship will know.
I mean, I feel like that's fairly solid, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
I equate connection to like bars on the cell phone. Like the whole point is to be able to hear each other. and like,
I love it.
Yeah, the more bars, the better. But how you are achieving that is different based on the circumstances.
Mhm.
Oh my God. This reminds me. So in Portland, I was teaching part of the musical section of the workshops where we talked about like emotion creates motion. And like in this section of the workshop, this is one that Sonia and I used to teach all the time. And we would always tell this story about the Marvin Gaye song, Let's Get It On. And like this was the example of like, you can always take a song at face value, like literally, because that's a pretty prescriptive song as far as what it means. That doesn't necessarily mean that like that's the emotion you have to go with for that song, because like Sonia would generally take it literally. I could never take it seriously. So like she would be into the song, like feeling the Marvin Gaye vibe, and I would be cracking up and cutting jokes. And like I use this as a segue to talk about how we can accommodate each other when we're not quite in the same way. But before I got to that part, I can't remember who it was, but someone in the class was like, well, that explains why y'all are divorced. Like, damn, dude. I mean, true, but ouch.
It's like an unnecessary call out.
Oh
yeah, right.
Like that TikTok meme. It's like, it's a good joke. But can we?
Yes.
Can we?
Oh man. It took us a while to get back on track after that one.
I can imagine. I would think it would.
Oh man.
I think I have to tell Sonia that story still too. I don't know if I have yet or not. She'll love that.
Oh man, that's funny. All right.
So is there anything like we haven't asked you that you wanted to talk about for this topic?
Let's see. I talked a little bit about the nervous system thing. Oh, actually, I didn't quite go all the way on that one. One of the interesting things that I found with teaching people that relates to the nervous system thing, and like, hey, Laura, you're here. Can I tell this story about how we switched up the education thing? Yes. Okay, cool. So like, previously I had been teaching Laura specifically with the idea of like skill progression. We're trying to work on something like your balance or your stability. So we're going to put you in positions that are like optimally stressful outside of your comfort zone to build up that balance and stability. But for whatever reason, it would like progress, then regress, progress, then regress, until I came across some literature that made me decide to try something different, talking about like the nervous system, how we process information, and even how we have, and I'm probably paraphrasing this all very poorly, but how we have neuroreceptors all the way through our body, not just in our head. Everything that we have in our head is replicated somewhere in our body, right? Yeah. So I started to take the stance with Laura on this of like, okay, rather than like us trying to just teach you and build the skill set, the first thing I want you to do is just put yourself in the most stable and balanced position that you can be. Like, I don't care whether you're bending your knees, arching your back, bad posture. I don't care what you do, but I want you to feel as if you are in the most balanced and stable position that you can be. And when we started to take it from that mindset and we started working on building it up from there, we went from like struggling a little bit with like traveling turns to now she's popping herself up on one foot everywhere. So just by changing the mindset, just by fostering like the mental competency, we were able to see extremely good physical results. And yeah, it happened in like one session. That's right.
Wow.
Or I just wrote
That's
that in the chat.
That's great.
That's awesome. That actually brings me to another. Are you familiar with Carol Dweck's fixed mindset versus growth mindset
Oh, that
framework?
sounds really familiar. I feel like that's a book, right?
Yeah.
I feel like I might have that book and I just haven't read it yet.
It's a good one. So it's the idea, if you have a fixed mindset, you believe that your skills are set in stone. You were born with them. You cannot improve. You cannot grow. And feedback that tends to foster a fixed mindset is you're so smart, that kind of stuff. Whereas a growth mindset is like, if you put time and effort into something, you can improve at anything. And it's about focusing on the time and effort as opposed to the result. I feel like that those two mindsets, we tend to see a lot of fixed mindset students, at least I do. And understanding like West Coast swing is a completely learnable skill, and you can excel at it in your own body in the way that you were meant to dance this dance, and not trying to force yourself into somebody else's cookie cutter, but understanding that you can learn and get really good at this dance if you're willing to believe that you can.
Absolutely. And there's so much more room for it in this dance too. We have so much more potential for there to be a wide variety of success in it. Like, it's not like ballroom where if I have like the student that's in her 70s and she comes up to me and is like, I want to compete in ballroom. Like, yeah, you can, but that's really just taking your money. Like, with West Coast, like I actually have things that I can give this person to like optimize their dancing. They have routes they can go.
Yeah.
I love that. Yeah. I like the apparently I do have that book. Laura's saying that she will hand it to me. But one of the things that I start off my workshops with, my like intensive stuff, is I make everyone have the agreement that you have to enter the workshop with an empty cup. Meaning like all of the information you've learned from the other instructors, it's not wrong or gone. You're just not worried about it right now. Every bit of information that I'm going to try to give to you, you're going to interact with it as if it's new information.
Sometimes you need to hear the same thing 5 million different times before it actually makes a dent. And if you're not humble to that fact, you'll prevent yourself from having breakthroughs.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. I think I was telling I can't remember who it was I told this to, but like 2 years ago or so, I got a little piece of information from, I think, Robert Royston. And after I sat with that information and practiced it and processed it, I realized like, oh shit, this is what Sarah Van Drake was trying to teach me in 2009. Like, this is the same thing. So I'm pretty sure I actually messaged Sarah and was like, hey, I finally got it.
I got there. It took a while.
Oh my God. I've gotten to the point where sometimes when I'm teaching something, I'm like, I know I'm planting a seed. I know they're not going to get it. And I'll usually say, this probably isn't going to make sense to you right now, but like 2 or 3 years from now, you're going to be minding your own business and the light bulb's going to go off. You're like, she was right.
Yeah.
Yep.
I love the moments like that too.
Yeah.
Especially when I hear back about them from students. I love it when like the people I work with will come to me like, oh, I got it.
Yeah.
Neat.
So much fun.
Perfect. That's what I hoped.
Another fun thing is like when you up level a student's eyes so they can see technique at a different level to be more discerning. And some of them get kind of cranky about it. They're like, what have you done to me? I can't unsee
this. we just had somebody spamming the chat. Yep. The yups got progressively louder.
Sorry to everyone that we do that to here. Kind of, not really.
Sorry, not sorry.
Yeah. Perspective changes can be a mother. Oh my God. I remember I had a little transformation like that too, like talking about the strong tactile connection focus thing. Like I remember when I went through that period after I got past that period where like it was more about partnership rather than just tactile connection, and I started to look at all the people's dancing and the competitions especially a different way. It's like, son of a
Yeah.
man, that's all I need to know. I mean, of course, I need to know more still, but
Oh, here's a question. So, what percentage of the time does your teaching boil down to you're working too hard?
you know, a fairly significant amount. Yeah, a lot of the time, like it is somebody is just working too hard. They got to chill out a little bit. Absolutely.
So sometimes, because I feel grateful that I've been dancing my whole life, so I've had this control over my body in distinct parts for a long time. But so I don't understand when a student comes to me and they're learning dance later in life, and their body will do the most convoluted things. It feels natural to them, but I'm like, I would have to work so hard to recreate that. I was once helping someone try to understand grapevines in partner, in tandem, for West Coast Swing. Like that classic Robert Royston, we're doing grapevines together, right? And I could not for the life of me figure out how they were getting it wrong. I was like, you did what with your what? It took me a few hours, but I finally got them there. Well, it was rough for a while.
Yeah. Especially like some people's relationships to their bodies and their movement, if they haven't done things at an early age, like there can be huge disconnects there.
Yep.
That's a really hard one too. Like that's actually one of the things that started making me lean more towards the mental rather than just the physical side too, because that can actually help bridge that gap sometimes, is their idea about their own body and the visualization of it. But like, yeah, especially if it's hard, if it's harder for you to have empathy for the thing, like if you've never actually been in the position yourself, like that can be a tough one for a teacher.
Yeah.
I feel like there's also always those students that don't want to break things down. They just like feel like, oh, like I got it. Like I don't need to slow it down. It's fine. It's like, no,
but you don't.
But I think it would be helpful for you.
Oh yeah.
So you do that mental gymnastics of like, does this person want the validation or do they actually want the improvement?
Yeah. I love. I don't know if it's a good thing, but in those scenarios, I like just giving just enough rope to get the point across. It's like, you got it? Okay, you sure? All right, here's a song. Go do it. Show me.
Yep.
Didn't work, huh? Wonder why.
Strange.
If
only you had someone you were paying that could help you.
Yeah, thank you so much for joining us. This has been
thank you. It was
wonderful.
Great.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I love getting to chat about this kind of thing. There's not often where I have an audience that will stick with me for this long to actually hear me say all the things. So
that's what we're here for, you know?
Yeah. We'd love to have you back for an actual video analysis sometime.
Yeah, that'd be great.
For it.
Yeah, for sure. I'm down.
Just wait until you see my bad drawings. I once accidentally drew BB-8. Like that was like I was like emphasizing the radius of a follows frame, so like bird's eye view kind of situation, and extrapolating that out. And by the time I was done, I was off my soapbox. I'm like, I just drew BB-8, and hi chat. Well, thank you again for
great ending to our episode.
Yeah, we haven't scheduled when our next live episode will be, because Alicia and I are taking a little bit of a break, but thou shalt all be informed when we returneth. And if you have suggestions for future topics, we are all ears.
Yep.
My self-tanning routine.
As a fellow super pale person.
I especially like that one because I just said this whole thing about teachers like teaching things that maybe they're not experienced in.
You know, it's okay. It has nothing to do with what we're talking about here. So it doesn't matter.
fine. That would be a funny gimmick. Like I was trying to do 5-minute crafts while talking about West Coast swing.
Oh, there we go. I could go buy the what was that stuff called from ballroom? Protan and stuff you like paint on. While we're talking, I'm just painting myself.
I'm sure that would end really well. It'd look really nice. I mean,
at that point, we'd be doing it for some sort of charity. So like, do it on Twitch.
Once in my career in ballroom, and afterwards my coach went, Steven, no. Maybe we do eyeliner. So my next comp, no tan, but I look like Billy Idol, like a black eyeliner.
Everyone's got to find their look.
Yeah.
You know.
Paint
your guest during the session or a visual. That's amazing.
I love imitationals. Like that's one of the things that I don't see enough of.
Mm-hmm.
Were you at like the last Chico where Jordan imitated Chuck?
I think I was. I definitely was that
so good.
That was the crazy Chico, right? That was where everything went. Yeah.
I was there. And like the bartender like came in and asked for Courtney to cash out her tab while she was sitting in the invitational chair. Like, criminy people.
Armed security and the thing on Saturday night. That was nuts.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
I was not there for that. Sounds interesting.
Oh man, I was standing on a chair against the wall that entire invitational. It lasted like 2.5 hours.
Ooh,
it was
sounds a little rough.
That was super rough.
Chico was always an experience. That one particularly so.
So I've heard.
Yeah. I went to TAP for the first time in 2019, and walking into that hotel was surreal. I'm like, this is the Chico Hotel, just slightly larger. That's what it felt like.
It did have kind of a same vibe, yeah.
Right?
That's true.
Yeah. Private lessons in the lobby.
Yep.
Couple random questions because I thought them in my head. What is the most off-the-wall metaphor or analogy you have ever used in your teaching?
God. Off-the-wall metaphor and analogy. Man, I've done some really bad ones before too, but I'm so bad at the recall thing. Man.
Okay, we can plant the seed. Maybe one will pop into your head over the next half hour or so.
I'm absolutely sure that something will pop up because I can remember people groaning. I can remember that. I just can't remember the thing he said.
You very specifically remember the reaction to what you said.
Oh yes. Oh yes.
I remember earlier in my teaching career, if like the room got quiet, I'd be so anxious about it. But then later on, I'm like, oh no, they're just processing. This is processing time.
Mm-hmm.
Or they're just zoning out. Mm-hmm. And it got to the point where I'm like, that joke I just used, that joke kills. Why are you quiet? So I called them out on it when that happened. I'm like, that joke was funny.
That's amazing.
Yeah,
I need you all to laugh right now, even if you're lying.
I consider myself part teacher, part dancer, part comedian. That's like my brand.
Mm-hmm. Good mix.
Yeah.
Very good mix. People learn better when they're entertained.
Yeah. It's true. Great for mnemonics in particular.
Yeah. So like that reminds me of when I was teaching with Sonia, especially when we were out in the European circuit, we were getting used to all of these different cultures and everything. Mm-hmm. And we were teaching in Finland at this like huge multi-dance camp. So we had literally 200 or 300 people in this like basketball stadium place, and we're teaching them West Coast swing. Wow. And Sonia is a lot more aggressive in certain ways than me. So Sonia asks a question and we don't get any response. I'm like, okay, we keep going. Sonia asks another question. We don't get any response. Keep going. She asks one more time and she goes, and we're not going to keep going until someone answers me. And she like just puts her hand on me, stops me from doing anything, and she waits. She's staring them down and just waits. And I'm twitching, like so much silence. Went on for 30 seconds. After that workshop, like more than 30 seconds, sorry. But after that workshop, we had somebody come up to us like, just so you know, like in general, the Finnish people are a lot more quiet and reserved than other people. So no, it wasn't that we didn't want to interact. It's just that no one's really comfortable doing that. It was true. In general, the Finnish people were a lot more quiet and reserved.
Oh man.
Yeah.
No, that's funny. What was I just gonna say? I lost my train of thought. I'm really sorry.
No worries.
Okay. We'll reboard at the station.
We're moving up. So are there any, I remember in local competitions, because like I judge locally, but not large scale because of my invisible disability. It's just not a feasible thing at an event for me. But I remember there was this period of like a half a year where a local dancer who is now an all-star would come up to me and be like, how'd I do? I'm like, you tripled, you made finals. Because there was a small local competition. And so it started getting so bad that I went up and asked them, what do you want me to look at? so I can give you some more, the feedback you're clearly looking for. Just like jump right in front of that problem.
That's such a great one. Oh my gosh.
You tripled.
Oh man.
I won't say the name of the professional that did this, although I'm pretty sure if I said the name it wouldn't surprise anyone. But I remember hearing this story about someone going up to a certain professional and asking for feedback after results had been posted. And the only feedback that the professional gave was, "Oh, you just need to dance better." Like,
so
wow.
No, that never would have crossed my mind ever.
Right? Like,
thought I was wearing the wrong color tie.
Technically accurate, not technically helpful.
Oh man. I mean, to be fair, I feel like sometimes that is about the level of benefit that you get from asking questions to judges that look at you for half a second sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah. I mean,
where were we?
I have no idea. We're down, I think, the third rabbit hole, but I'm cool with it.
Yeah, definitely took a detour on that one.
Well, are there really no questions from those who are with us live?
Bree, Kate, Sally, Andrew, Mudit, Laura.
I love how you tell the story about like not calling people out in Finland. And you're like, bam, bam,
say all
bam.
their names. Boom. I mean, I don't feel like it's calling someone out if I called them all out.
Fair. But now, if editing me decides to include their names because you said them, the call out will be forever emblazoned on YouTube.
You just have like a series of beeps. Beep, 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 beep. Wow, Steven had such a foul mouth on this. Wow.
Maybe I'll find like some sort of cartoon sound effect, like a cartoon honking horn or something.
Yeah. Speaking of TikTok, you could do the truck honk.
All right. Well, this has been absolutely.
I feel like it means we did a good job if they don't have questions. Like we just
I hope so.
Everything was so well talked about.
Yeah, their brains are buffering.
Yeah, there's a lot that happens on our shows,
Oh,
that's glorious.
Like this. My partner just brought me Kayla, and that's why my camera moved over and over again.
Hello, kitty.
Say hi to the internet.
That thing wants to snug, and it was very hurry. Take it.
I'm working.
I'm working.
I know it's not true, but in my head, it was the cat that said that.
All right, we have devolved into bloopers only. So I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording.
Oh yeah, sure.